Hey guys, the name is Jasper, and welcome back to another honest review. So, I just wanted to say to all of you that there is going to be no video game or show spoilers about The Last of Us. So, we are all in a safe place to talk about this amazing show. So, I'm a huge fan of The Last of Us, like the video game itself. I remember it was during the last days of the PlayStation 3 era, and then Naughty Dogs, the video game developers who developed The Last of Us and also the Uncharted series, announced that they're going to have a new IP. I think it was maybe during the E3 season. And I remember seeing the teaser trailer for The Last of Us. It's just the logo and yeah, basically it's a teaser. I didn't care about the IP itself because I haven't played the Uncharted games and I just don't care about Naughty Dogs in general. I only bought a PlayStation 3 just to play GTA 5. And when they released the game and I heard nothing but amazing reviews about the game itself, I decided, hey, let me buy The Last of Us and let me play it. And oh my god, you guys, this has been The Last of Us is a game that you never play. The Last of Us is an experience. You experience it. And then many years later, they released The Last of Us Part 2, and I can't believe Part 2 is even way better than the first one. So I think all of it, I think I can say that I'm a huge The Last of Us fan. That's my Tagalog accent showing. And I think The Last of Us series storytelling is one of the best out there. If someone told me what is the best video game of all time, The Last of Us is easily one of my top fives. So basically, what is The Last of Us? The Last of Us is basically an apocalypse game released during a time where every other video game developers make games that involves about zombies. And The Last of Us was released in a time where it's already in the late stages of that zombie era trend. And it's basically a story about a guy named Joel having this connection with a teenager named Ellie. That's the main point of the story, without spoiling anything. And the highlight of that story is basically the conversation and the relationships between these two main characters. I've also seen HBO's other show, Chernobyl, which talks about what happened during the nuclear meltdown back in, I think, Russia or Ukraine. Chernobyl it's something that happened in real life, and that movie is very haunting given that it happened in real life, but it feels like it's an apocalypse TV show. There were like maybe just 5 to 6 episodes, but that is one of the most amazing shows that I have ever seen, and I also told other people to watch it. So just a few years ago, Sony decided to make PlayStation Studios, which is a different department for the PlayStation IP or thing. But this time, PlayStation Studios is going to handle like live action shows or live action movies that involves the PlayStation video games. So basically, PlayStation Studios is here to handle any future Twisted Metal movies, Uncharted movies, or an Uncharted TV show. And that's why we got The Last of Us. Now, the first PlayStation Studio thing that got released to the public was Uncharted, starring Tom Holland. And a lot of people didn't like that movie, and for many various reasons. I've seen the movie in Netflix, and I kind of like it, but it easily isn't one of the best. And all of this, again, leads to this thing, which is called the video game live adaptation curse. And whenever there's a movie or there's a show that came from video games, it's usually bad or maybe lackluster. But recently, we are getting some pretty high quality video game related movies so far. We also have the Sonic movies, and I heard nothing but good stuff about that one. Uncharted was kind of good for me. And then we also got Tomb Raider, which is also kind of good. Oh, before I forgot, there's also Arcane, which is, well, it's not live action, but it came from a video game. And it's actually an animated show from Netflix, and it's like one of the best things that I've ever seen so far in Netflix. And Arcane is one of those video game adaptations that really raised the bar. So last week when they released The Last of Us episode 1, I was like, oh my god, just from episode 1 itself, it beat Arcane. Like episode 1 beat the entire show of Arcane. And I really hate when I try to compare stuff. But Arcane is a show that can be really hard to watch or maybe difficult to understand when you show it to other people, like probably for non-gamers or someone who just enjoys shows and movies for just basically entertainment. Basically, Arcane is one of those shows that you really have to think in order to fully understand the entirety of the story and even the characters revolving around it. And that's why I think Arcane is one of the gold standards when it comes to video game adaptations. The Last of Us did something very unique to it. It basically told the first parts of the first video game while at the same time being really accessible to a mass audience. My second time watching this show was with my parents, and my parents are hooked. Now, my parents are fans of telenovelas, especially Filipino telenovelas, and they don't usually watch American TV shows. But after seeing the first episode of The Last of Us, they are simply hooked. They fell in love with the characters and they wanted to know more about the story itself. I remember my dad telling me that episode one's ending is probably very intelligent. And without spoiling things about the show itself, my dad telling me that it's like one of the biggest twists of all time really speaks a lot about how accessible the show is to even an older generation who haven't played video games. And within the context of the first episode, they also made some small changes that it made me feel like I'm watching a show that happened in real life. And this is, I think, the magic that the creator of the Chernobyl series, I think his name is Craig Mazin. Craig Mazin was able to make this show feel like it's something that really happened in our reality. It feels like it's a pandemic that happened in the past, but in a different timeline where all of us survived. And it's the same thing that I felt while I was watching his other previous show, which was Chernobyl. And episode 1 really hits home because I am a guy who survived the pandemic. Even though I think that pandemic is still ongoing, the COVID pandemic is still ongoing. Back when, during the 2020 year, I felt the fear and the mystery of this virus by just watching the first 30 minutes of episode 1. And episode 1 happened like probably a decade ago. It started in the year 2003, and it is a time where there is no internet. The only news that you can get is from other than television. You have to listen to a radio. And when I try to put myself into the shoes of the characters in the first 30 minutes of the show, I am actually really afraid. I mean, you have a ton of questions about what is happening. How come there's a lot of military jets flying above me? How come there's a lot of helicopters? Businesses are trying to close early. It's really scary without the knowledge of the internet in your hands. And it was something that was really effective that the game wasn't able to express. That's why I said that this is very accessible, because within the context of the show, within 1 hour, the show was able to show this reality that it's something that it feels like it really happened in the past. It kind of feels like I'm watching also a reenactment of a pandemic that happened around 2003. And within the context of that show, without the freedom of video games, my parents were able to fully understand what it is like to live in that kind of world, especially in the world of The Last of Us. Again, I said that there were some slight changes that they did here, but those changes further enhance the storytelling. Without spoiling you guys anything from the game or from the show, there was this change about this specific zombie. Basically, it's the first zombie that you will encounter in the game and even in the show itself. And I feel like this recreation of that scene made it more effective and made it more like scarier, because you simply don't know what to expect. We were introduced to this character that is very weak, probably easily a useless person, and then suddenly her/him being able to do some crazy stuff, given that just a few hours ago they are very useless. Then it really shows the potential of this virus is. And since we're talking about the first 30 minutes of the show, there was also this first 5 minutes of the intro that was very haunting because it made you feel like this virus already exists like maybe 50 years ago or 60 years ago. It was something that the scientists already know about, but for some reason we weren't able to avoid it. It feels like that the first 5 minutes is like the calm before the storm. However, with this storm incoming, we don't have a boat with us. We don't have an umbrella with us. We don't have a shelter where we can hide in. This is a storm that you will eventually experience. And then when the storm did happen in the year 2003, then you feel really helpless. The 2003 stuff was further expanded in the second episode, but I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I just want you guys to see the two episodes, so just to experience it. The casting of Pedro Pascal from The Mandalorian, he played The Mandalorian. He was also the guy from Game of Thrones, and he was also the villain from Wonder Woman 2. And the casting of Bella Ramsey, which played as Lady Mormont in Game of Thrones, so both of them are Game of Thrones characters. It's just simply perfect. This is basically the perfect casting that I've seen when it comes to video game live adaptations. It really felt like I'm watching Joel. I'm watching a living and breathing Joel in live action. And the same thing can be said with Bella Ramsey. Bella Ramsey was able to show this essence of Ellie that was in the video games. For some reason, Bella Ramsey, it feels like I feels like the Ellie in the video games and the Ellie in this show are at the same age. But for some reason, Bella Ramsey feels like she's more childish. You can really feel the innocence within her, which makes her more likable because it feels like she's someone that you can really care about. You want nothing but the best for this child right here. Pedro Pascal, on the other hand, is another example of an amazing show of perfect casting. You can clearly see in him that he's a survivor, but at the same time, he is also very hopeless. He just doesn't care about the world. He just wanted to survive. Now try to pair that character with an Ellie character, then there's a ton of potential to explore the relationship of the two of these characters. And that's why I think the first game was simply amazing, because I just simply love seeing the relationship form throughout the entire story. In episode 2, they also did some other changes that just like I said, it also further enhanced the storytelling. Probably the biggest change that they did here compared to the video games, but I think it was perfectly well done, and it made that scene more horrifying. And just to show you guys how horrifying, this right here is a photo of my parents reacting to that scene. So yeah, if you're a person who doesn't play video games but you guys want to experience the Last of Us story, then it feels like HBO was able to make this amazing show. It respects the source material, and while it made some changes, the changes made a ton of sense. For the non-gamer, this is peak The Last of Us, and this might probably be the most essential way of experiencing the story itself. And this is coming from a guy who fell in love with the video games, who played the video games several times. And I'm saying you guys all of this just by seeing the first 2 episodes of the show. So what do you guys think? Do you guys agree with me? And what do you guys think of the show itself if you guys have seen it? Comment down below and let me know. And yeah, after this show has been done, I'm going to do a new review about it. But so far, this is a 10 out of 10 for me. Goodbye, guys, and take care.